Okay, so over the weekend there was a bit of a controversy regarding a memo published by a Google employee. His name's James Damore. It was titled Google's Ideological Echo Chamber. And in it, he basically talked about how there's a distinct sort of leftist or liberal bent in Google in terms of its core principles and hiring practices and the whole bit. And he essentially just talked about how there's this ideological echo chamber and there's no tolerance for other opinions, and this ideology is not just amongst the people who work at Google, but is pervasive in the corporate structure in terms of its policies and practices. And the fact is, this is evidenced by the fact that they have a VP of Diversity, Inclusion, and Corporate Integrity. Which to me just seems kind of, I don't know, Soviet era in a sense, right? If you could take Soviet practices and put them in place in a corporation, that's the kind of office or ministry you might find in Soviet Russia, but whatever. So anyway, if you read the manifesto, it's about 10 pages long, and you know, it's well articulated, well thought out, and it essentially just talks about, like I said, the ideological bias that exists at Google, and it explains, you know, certain closely held beliefs from the people at Google regarding gender, and its practice for gender parity, or I guess quest for gender parity within the technological departments at Google. And when he says technological departments, he's talking specifically about software engineers. And he goes on to explain, you know, the differences between men and women, like biologically, and how these aren't social constructs and the whole bit. I encourage you to read it, and if I can link it in the description below, I will. But anyway, so after he releases this memo, this manifesto that he wrote, Google, of course, their diversity, inclusion, and corporate integrity vice president, came out with a statement saying of course we value ideological diversity, but there's a limit, essentially. And this memo does not reflect our values. Now, apparently, this guy's been fired. He's been fired because he proliferated. He expressed gender stereotypes that are not in keeping with Google's core values. So, way to prove their point, Google. Way to prove the guy's point. In one statement, they say, well, you know, we want to have a positive discussion from different points of view, but not that positive a discussion. Not a discussion that includes things that we disagree with. And then, to prove the guy's point, they fire him. And they fired him, from what I understand anyway, because he expressed gender stereotypes not in keeping with Google's core values. So Now, to see it reported, of course, the media is doing a 180 on it and saying, man who wrote anti-diversity tirade fired from Google. You know, these are the headlines that you're seeing on Time. You know, Time.com put that out. It's funny because Google used to say, you know, part of their corporate ethos was do no evil. You know, and I saw a 60 Minutes documentary, you know, I don't know, like a decade ago, maybe a little less, but where they're talking to the CEO of Google, and he said, yeah, our company motto is do no evil. And at that time, I guess the idea was, well, we want to expand the information age to developing worlds, and developing countries, the developing world, and you know, spread information and give access to information to everybody on the planet. And we're not in it just to make money and yada yada yada. And they had very progressive, you know, corporate structure in terms of, you know, employee stock options and employee ownership of the company and that kind of thing. And from what I understand, they treated their employees well. They, you know, but this doesn't sound like doing no evil. Firing somebody because they wrote this memo and it doesn't conform to your ideological vision. You let him go. And the whole purpose of the memo that he wrote was, hey, we need to have an honest discussion that includes people with different viewpoints, because right now there's a bubble, there's an echo chamber, and nobody with any other ideas can express anything for fear of being fired. And what do? You go up and fire them. A little crazy. And like I said, I encourage you to read the memo. It's out there, you can find it. Oh, and it was the original article about this memo was on BuzzFeed. This was before the guy got fired. And you should have seen the comments in BuzzFeed. Man, it was nothing but, you know, Tumblr level screeching about how this guy's clearly just a racist and a sexist. We can't get anywhere if nobody's willing to discuss things honestly. If all you're looking to do is malign your ideological opponent, you will never convince anybody of your position. And you will never be convinced of anything different from what you already believe. Which I guess is the nature of echo chambers, it's the nature of bubbles. The thing that's so concerning about this is that Google has an immense amount of power, right? And the fact that they're sort of wearing their ideological position on their sleeve, and you can see that if you go back and look at, you know, there was controversy surrounding search terms on Google during the election campaign, right? They overwhelmingly showed positive results and showed positive autocomplete results for Hillary Clinton and negative autocomplete results for Donald Trump and negative search results for Donald Trump. Whereas Bing wouldn't do that. So if you started looking up Hillary Clinton criminal on Google, you would find Hillary Clinton criminal justice platform, or Hillary Clinton scandal, or you start typing Hillary Clinton SCA, and it would do everything to put the word scandal either not show up in the autocomplete or be at the very bottom in the autocomplete results. Anyway. what's concerning about Google having this blatant disregard for unbiased operation is that they're essentially a magic librarian, right? If all the world's information exists in this one library, Google's this librarian who stands at the front. You say, hey, librarian, I'd like to find information about this. And then Google will come and curate all that information and put it to you right in front of you. Now, if the curator is deciding what it is it's going to show you based on their own ideological predisposition, then that's not a very good librarian. Anyway, check out the manifesto. It's worth reading. Seems like the guy, this James Damore guy, he's probably seen a few Jordan Peterson videos. But anyway, I'm at work. Thanks very much. Talk to you later.